Ooh, welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats, our New York Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Our Hall of Fame hockey writer, Larry Brooks, will join us a bit later in the program. I'm Jake Brown, alongside the star of the show, the queen of the Post, Rangers beat writer, Mollie Walker. Mollie, these Rangers, they score on the power play. They score in every play, I feel like. They just do not stop scoring. 17 goals in 4 games. Another 6-4 win on Monday. This team is rolling. They're 3-1. Mika is just, 8 points already in 4 games. They're on quite the pace for a good season. It's a little early, so you don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but this is fun to watch.
It's kind of hard to not get ahead of ourselves, because when you got Mika Zibanejad and Artemi Panarin at the top, not just like 5, top 3 in points production through the first couple games is as about of a promising sign as you could get. I think that the fact that the scoring has come not just in bunches, but from the top 6 primarily, and the top 9 too. Filipino's gotten in on the action as well a little bit, is also really encouraging, especially just considering how much of a top heavy lineup the Rangers have had for a while, but it hasn't always been the case where the top 6 has been able to consistently produce as they have through the first 4 games. But we would be remiss if we didn't point out how they've been doing on the other side of the puck, which hasn't been as tight as they probably would like it to be. But the good thing is that the Rangers are not looking past that in any way, shape, or form. Even after the 6-4 win over Anaheim, the mood in the locker room, not that it was disappointment, because I asked them, how difficult is it to be critical of your defense when you are making up for it on the other side of the puck? But they are disappointed in their defensive efforts through the first 4 games. I definitely think they want to tighten it up. I think head coach Gerard Gallant wants them to tighten it up, and that's kind of been the message. But it's really difficult to be critical and to look at these first 4 games with a critical eye, because 17 goals in 4 games is no small feat. So I think it's a good start, and I think that they have their priorities in order and they know where they want to improve.
It's a week of memories here at Madison Square Garden, Mollie. Monday, they did the video intro for Ryan Strome, who, you could tell he was a little emotional there, sitting on the bench watching that. His teammates kind of, hit his helmet, acknowledged him. That was cool. And, now you also, you had Frank Vatrano as well, who Sam Rosen called Vincent Trocheck. Vatrano, poor Sam. Vincent Trocheck's first Ranger goal at the Garden, his second goal overall. First goal as a Ranger, Madison Square Garden, gets called Frank Vatrano. Sam, quick, hopefully there's some editors that could fix that. But how funny was that? You were right in front of Sam when he made it.
Yeah. I actually didn't hear it, but I saw the reaction online, and it's a tough mistake, and I do feel for Trocheck. That is a tough way to have his first call at Madison Square Garden go down, but mistakes happen, accidents happen. It obviously wasn't intentional, but yeah, it was a really great night for Ryan Strome and Frank Vatrano. Frank Vatrano got a nice little picture on the board. Thank you, Frank. And he was a big part of what they did in the Eastern Conference Final last season and getting there. He's just a sharp shooter, and he showed that off in the game as well. Probably the biggest thing the Rangers miss about him. And then obviously Ryan Strome, I give him a lot of credit. I think he tried to downplay it a lot because of how he was probably feeling. He said something along the lines of, turning the page in the offseason, which I'm sure took a bit of time for him to do. And he really did express how much he wanted to stay in New York. And there was a deal on the table early on in the regular season. But, at the end of the day, this is a business, and these players do need to get paid, and they do need to capitalize at the right points and times of their career. And this was the right point in time for Ryan Strome's career. The Rangers weren't going to be able to afford what Ryan Strome could get at max on the open market. So I think that they recognize that. And I think that that's also why the first deal was turned down. But Ryan Strome, I know, definitely wanted to make it work. I really know he did, but he seems really happy. I mean, how could the beaches of California not make you happy? I think that probably helped the transition a little bit. And he was just talking about how it's really nice to have some stability for his family. Getting that nice big deal that he did from Anaheim. So I think it all worked out for the best. I think the Rangers are still in a good spot, picking up Vincent Trocheck to replace him. I think the chemistry between Trocheck and Panarin is still in the works and coming along. It's going to take a while to get to where Strome and Panarin were playing together as long as they did. But I think it worked out for all parties. I really do.
You had Vatrano return, you had Strome return, and you also had Sammy Blake come back from the ACL tear. Good to see him back on the ice. And then Thursday, former head coach David Quinn, today, as we drop this episode, returns as the Rangers take on the Sharks. He spoke with the media. Any impressions of what the old Ranger coach had to say?
It was a pretty good conversation. I think that he also was kind of downplaying a little bit. I feel like that's, I don't know if it's just us in the media kind of make a bigger deal of it than we have to. I guess that's kind of our job, is to make the storylines and to point out the storylines. But I mean, David Quinn's tenure in New York, it obviously had a bit of a tough ending. But I think all in all, when David Quinn looks back at his tenure in New York, I think he is proud of the way that it went, because he was brought in to usher along the young players. That was that was the purpose of bringing him in. He had that college coach touch to him, which was also his benefit and his downfall, I think. But it was everyone seems to forget it was his first NHL coaching gig. And I think that needs to be spoken a little bit louder than it has. Nobody's going to be perfect in that spot, and he is the first person to admit that. He said it on the call. He said it. He's gone on a couple podcasts in between when he was let go and when he was hired by the Sharks, and when he was the coach of Team USA at the championships. I think that he acknowledges it, that he made a lot of mistakes and that he learned a lot from it. And I know a lot of it comes down to how he was coaching the veterans on the Rangers team. But you live and you learn. And I think David Quinn kind of has that attitude and knows that he is still evolving as a coach and still learning. It's only a second team in the NHL. And obviously, it's been a bit of a rough start for them. They are still looking for their first win of the season and his first as head coach of the Sharks. So we'll see if that happens Thursday night at the Garden or somewhere else down the line. But he had a pretty good. I asked him about watching the Rangers go to the Eastern Conference Final last season, if he was surprised or not. And he said he was not surprised at all. I think that they had this timeline in mind when they brought him in of where they should be 1 year down the line, 2 year down the line, 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line. And obviously Quinn didn't get to see it through that far, but they did take the necessary steps to get to where they are today. So it would be unfair to say that David Quinn didn't play a part in the Rangers' success, because he came in and he did his job, what was asked of him. And then it just didn't work out. And it was time for a more veteran voice in the room in head coach Gerard Gallant. So all in all, I think he should have a warm welcome tonight at the Garden, Thursday night at the Garden. We'll see. We can talk about that later.
Let's hope he doesn't evolve as a head coach tonight. He could do that the next game, but let's hope he doesn't. That he's gonna go out to Marquee tonight if he gets his first victory as Ducks head coach. Sharks head coach, at the Garden against his former team. My God, you'll see him popping bottles with the whole team after the game. Good God, let's hope that doesn't happen. Well, we'll get to your mailbag questions in a second, but I want to close this, Molly, with the locker room this week. Do you have any chicken nuggets? We'll call it chicken nuggets, since that's one of my favorite foods.
I like that. Yeah, I got a couple. Brayden Schneider, he obviously changed his number from 45 to 4. So I asked him about it. He said that he wore 4 when he was younger and he just wanted to switch to single digits. He literally just likes the number more. So there wasn't anything big behind it. Obviously, Greshner was the last one to wear 4. So I think that will come with some expectations no matter what. We did get to see behind the scenes of the off the boards filming with the Ryans, and man, that was just a hoot. You should see the way Ryan Reeves walks around the room and basically identifying his next target and making them sit to do it. The theme was Halloween, so he was asking everyone about their Halloween costumes. He was reminiscing with Igor about his fun. I don't even remember what it was. It was the John Travolta character. What is it called? I can't
from
think
Greece?
of it. No, not Greece. With Winona Ryder, I think.
Hearts, you gotta research Winona Ryder, John Travolta. What is this?
Oh, Pulp Fiction. Uma Thurman, actually. I guess it would be not Winona Ryder.
Classic mix-up.
Sorry, my my movie knowledge of that.
How do we
that
recover
frame.
from this now?
I don't know. I don't think we can. Yeah, but the Pulp Fiction Halloween that he did, there was a video of him and his wife doing the fun dance from the movie. So that was kind of fun to watch them reminisce about that. And Zach Jones had to spend his 22nd birthday at a fan event, but he had a great attitude about it and he was happy to do it. We were kind of giving him some crap. We were like, how did you get roped into having to go to a fan event on your birthday? But it was good. And then obviously Jacob Trouba blocked that big shot with his head the other night and he had to briefly leave the game, but I'll tell you, he's got a really big bump on the side of his head that looked quite painful, but I think he's fine and ready to go. So
listen, when you're a captain, you just got to take the bumps and roll with them. So whoever, Ryan Reeves, I mean, hang it in the Louvre. It's hanging right now.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to
that
do an emergency
picture
podcast after that. That was incredible.
I know it was. If he wasn't doing the off the boards filming, I wanted to ask him about that. I wanted to ask him, like, are you gonna frame that in your household? Because I would have that over the freaking fireplace if I were Ryan Reeves. That was an unbelievable shot, just a wonderful sports photo. Can't get better than that for hockey, I don't think.
Marcus Foligno. He's thoughts and prayers are with him and his family during this difficult time of getting its ass whooped by Revo. All right, let's go to your subtext questions. How do people submit to you, Bobby? Is this Post Sports Plus, these questions?
It is. It's on Post Sports Plus. You can't subscribe to the subtext if you don't have Post Sports Plus, but once you do, you go on the website and there should be a way for you to plug in your phone number and it automatically signs you up and adds you on to my text blast, and I send out a bunch of it's a text blast. That's basically what it is.
Like something from Nickelodeon or something.
Yeah. I'll send you updates right to your phone from practice, things you need to know. I send the lineups before every game. And sometimes if I'm feeling like it, I'll send you some of my thoughts mid-game, after the game, some quotes, whatever you guys want, really. Just send me a text and let me know.
I just want you to put like sup in there and then just fool everyone. Just put sup. That's it. All right. So sign up Post Sports Plus, first 30 days free trial. So submit and then you could submit questions. All right. We'll do a few now and then we'll save a few for Larry coming up in a few minutes. Stephen Palchich and James Kolpis want to know, was Dryden Hunt waived or sent to Hartford? Did Hunt do anything wrong, or was it strictly a money issue, or is it the roster spot for Vitali Kravtsov?
A little bit of everything in that question there. When you do get waived, it's for the purpose of sending the player to Hartford. It's just a matter of if he clears or not, which we haven't heard yet at this point in time. I imagine that he will clear. If he doesn't, the Rangers are in trouble, man. He didn't do anything wrong. I mean, him coming in and scoring that game-tying goal against Winnipeg, which first of all was a really nice goal by Dryden Hunt. And he stepped in when Kravtsov was hurt, when Ryan Carpenter was hurt. He's in a depth role this season, which is a little bit different from what he did last season. He didn't do anything wrong at all. And Gerard Gallant loves him. Just a Gerard Gallant kind of player. It was a money issue. They need to have some space. Carrying 22 instead of 23 on the roster helps them accrue cap space leading into the trade deadline, which is they're counting pennies here. Every single cent counts. Which kind of leads into the next question, actually, from Michael Silvers. He said, even after Hunt got put on waivers, do you anticipate Chris Drury making paper transactions, sending players to Hartford on off days to earn more cap space for the deadline? I don't know if I'd say anticipate it. It's definitely a possibility, but when you think about it, when you send players down to Hartford, they're not making their NHL salary during those days. So it's a little bit of a, slippery slope. You don't want to do that too often, only when you really have to, because it's really not fair to the players to just keep, sending them up and down like that. But they are counting pennies and they are trying to make as much space as possible. I think if they only carry 22, they can get up to $4 million at the trade deadline in cap space, which would be huge and beneficial. Nobody should be expecting the type of 4-player haul that they brought in last season at the deadline. They just simply can't afford it. So every bit of space is going to count for the Rangers.
All right. This question is from a herd of people. This is from, the population of Delaware. Paul Karp, Rich Turner, Bill Carter, Scott Manson, Frank Rothel. I know they won with this basic lineup, but isn't it crucial to get Vitali Kravtsov into the lineup to determine what we have? Wouldn't it be a tremendous boost to the team if he lives up to the scouting that led them to draft him in the top 10? Is Kravtsov going to play for the Rangers again? And what is the future? Where will Kravtsov play now that Lafreniere and Kakko are stalwarts on the first two lines? Take it away, Mollie.
It's a good question. They definitely need to find out what they have in Vitali Kravtsov. That being said, we'll find out Thursday night if he's in the lineup or not. But the couple days leading up to practice, it kind of seems like he's going to be a healthy scratch. But I think that it's just Gerard Gallant wanting to motivate him to actually break into the lineup and to really show that, he's ready to contribute in some facet. I mean, he unprompted said he loves Alexi Lafreniere in that right wing spot on the second line with Artemi Panarin and Vincent Trocheck. And there is nothing not to like about what Lafreniere has done in that spot. He's looked really good and he is making an impact in that spot, which is really all the Rangers could ask for. So, and that is where Kravtsov played for a little bit, during training camp, and in his first 3 shifts. So I think that before he was hurt. So I think that if he does get back in the lineup, which I do expect him to at some point, whether it be Thursday night or in a couple games or the next one, whatever it is, because they do need to know what they have and they do need to give him a look. I think it'll be on the third line in some capacity, which I think would drop Barclay Goodrow down to the fourth line, which is honestly where Barclay Goodrow should be in general, just to make the Rangers line up a little bit longer. But they got to find out what they have in Kravtsov. And the early signs, I mean, granted, he had 3 shifts in that first game, so you can't really judge yet. But I mean, ask anybody, Julien Gauthier probably outplayed him in the preseason. But with Kravtsov, the herd of people mentioned, he's a top 10 pick and they need to see if they can get something out of it. And for his cap hit too, at the moment, it would be really beneficial if he could be a full-time contributing member of the lineup. So we'll see.
We'll do one more before Larry comes on and he'll answer a few. Let's do from a lady, I believe, Audrey Greenberg. Audrey, I don't think I've met any man with the name Audrey.
Oh, God. Well, don't say that if
maybe,
it is.
We don't know. We'll assume she's a lady.
No, let's not assume anything.
We'll send it she'll send an update text next week. Yes, I am a girl, to respond. Don't have much confidence in our backup in goal. Jaroslav Halak may be a problem later in the season. What do you think, Mollie?
I disagree, honestly. I think that the one game that he played in Winnipeg, he kept them in it until the end, which was more a credit to the Rangers' breakdown on defense than it was Halak. I think Halak looked pretty good in that Winnipeg game, honestly. He had to stand on his head a little bit, honestly. He was the reason why Dryden Hunt was able to score one early in the third period, and suddenly it was a tie game. He only let up one. for most of the game. And then it was on the Rangers where that game went from there as a whole, not just Halak. I think Halak is a really experienced goalie. We've talked about it on here before. He has been around the block. And my one long conversation with him, that's just the vibes that I got. He's seen some I think
Watch
he
the
really
language.
has. No, because he really has. And I think that's the kind of backup goalie that you want. It's beneficial. I really do. I don't think it'll be a problem at all. If anything, I think that down the line later in the season, Halak is going to be, a great guy to have, just to maybe give Shesterkin some breathers leading into the playoffs, when we know that Igor Shesterkin plays game after game after game after game. So I disagree, Audrey, whether you're a man or a woman. I disagree.
If I'm a man or am I a woman? That's from Man or Muppet. I don't know if you knew that from the Muppets. Great movie, great song.
I didn't.
You should probably watch that. Hearts knows all about that. If you haven't watched the Muppet movie, then you're not living right. All right. Well, someone who I know has watched the Muppet movie is Larry Brooks. Actually, he probably hasn't, but we'll ask him next on Up in the Blue Seats. He has confirmed during the commercial break that he has not seen the Muppets, but he does join us now. It is our Hockey Hall of Fame writer at the New York Post, Larry Brooks. Follow him on Twitter at NYP_Brooksy. Read his stories in the Post, nypost.com, and of course, Post Sports Plus. Larry, let's start with a subtext question for you from Rick Schwartz. How do you think Jimmy Vesey is playing?
I think he's doing exactly what the Rangers brought him in to do. He can play up, he can play down in the lineup. I think he's been pretty impressive on the penalty kill, on the forecheck. I'm sorry. I think he's gotten in well on the forecheck. I think he adds a little bit of skill to their third and fourth line. So, for a player who's signing for a $750 as their 12th, 13th forward, I think he's been fine.
I would agree. I think the next person I want to ask you about is Mika Zibanejad. He's just really hit the ground running to start the season. So is Artemi Panarin, for that matter. But I feel like that's more expected. What are you seeing from Mika and the player he's turned into?
What I see from Mika is the exact player he was at the end of the 1920 season, before the COVID pause. He scored 23 goals in his last 22 games. He had evolved into a shooter, which is kind of unusual for centers in the NHL. Although you could say Austin Matthews is a shooter. But he is playing with so much confidence, and I think that's always been one of the factors with Mika. Is getting him to play with confidence, is getting him just to play on instinct, and not and for him not to get into his head too often. He has elite skills, and when you marry that with an elite approach, mental approach, which he has, you have an elite player. And I think right now, Mika is, among the, whatever you want to say, 5-10 best players in the NHL. I mean, his penalty killing, his work on the power play, obviously, his 5-on-5, he's, they're generally matched up against either the other team's top line or their checking line, but he's been going up against top lines. And he's just so assertive in everything he does. He's playing with the flair. He's got one of the great shots in the NHL. He really, and that one timer from the left circle right now in the power play. It is Alex Ovechkin. It is Steven Stamkos. It is Mika Zibanejad. They are equivalent at this point, and so that's just a weapon that the Rangers have, and he is a weapon that they can throw out for 20, 21, 22 minutes a night. He's off to a spectacular start, but he's off to a great start. He generally kind of tiptoes his way into the season, but it's not as if he hasn't done this before, because he did do this at the end of the 1920 season. We know the following season was ruined by COVID for him, right. and then last year he was a very, very, very good player. So This has always been within Zibanejad's capabilities.
Another guy that's started off pretty good, and you had a good tweet about him the other night about Kaapo Kakko when he was circling the zone with the puck before backhanding it in for a goal. You said that was the Kaapo Kakko from the World Championships. Just what did you mean by that? And what are your thoughts on how he started the season? I mean, he went from a game 6 scratch to the right wing of the top line in just a few months. So what's happened in your mind?
Yeah, well, what I meant is that that's the player, the player who took the puck to the net. That's the player that's what he did in the World Juniors that year. That's what he did in the World Championships that year, and that's why he was the second overall pick. Everyone who watched the World Championships saw Kaapo Kakko dominate, and to a point where there was some debate about whether he or Jack Hughes should be number one overall that year.
Yep.
It was. You look back now and you say, well, that didn't really happen, but it did. And you can see the confidence with which he's playing now. He's he has learned how to play against older players. He has learned how to play against bigger players, and he's gotten bigger himself. He is strong with the puck. He's been strong with the puck on the boards for a couple of years now, but he hadn't been able to take that next step to bring the puck to the net. They would just stay on the outside. He would set guys up maybe, but he was not able to complete the final step and go from the boards to the net. Now you see him handling the puck, carrying the puck, taking the puck to the net, creating traffic in front. He's very, very difficult to handle one-on-one. And I do think that, and I wrote about this the other night after the game, that his Ranger career could have gone two ways after the scratch. He could have decided, at the end of a contract, listen, this is not working out for me, and no hard feelings, but I think I'd rather go somewhere else. And instead, he just rededicated himself to becoming a better player. And he said the other day when I was talking to him about it, he said he's always wanted to be here. This is where he wants to be. This is where he wants to succeed. So, and I know you talked to his agent over the summer, Michael Yu, who I thought was really interesting in describing the way Kakko had reacted to the scratch, and said, look, this is just one of those things. Don't build it up. He's not looking to leave. Yeah. And that's, what Kakko said. I want to be here and I want to be better. So, and that's, he used the summer to build on last year, to take the disappointment of being scratched and turn it into a positive for him. So he right now looks like the perfect, it's interesting because last year when they got Vatrano at the deadline, Vatrano brought this shooting mentality to the Zibanejad-Kreider connection. And Gerard Gallant was talking about, oh, it's great to have a shooter. Now Kakko's not a shooter, but he's a guy who is so strong now below the hash marks that line now is becoming more of a possession line. And that's, during training camp, I talked to both Kreider and Zibanejad about how the team can improve 5-on-5. And they both talked about their own line. And Chris was the first, and then Mika later talked about how they wanted to be more of a possession line, how they didn't want to be a one and done line, just getting the one chance off the rush. They wanted to be a riding line, as Kreider says all the time now. And that's what they have with Kakko. They have this dimension of this physical player, and their line now can grind the other teams down. So he's added another dimension. Listen, we're a week into the season. There's a long way ahead, but the early indications are nothing but positive on Kakko and on that combination.
All right, another subtext question for you, Larry, from Joe Todaro and Joseph Meliambro. We talked about it last week. What would a potential trade for Patrick Kane look like? It's hard to imagine the Rangers will get to the trade deadline without injuries. necessitating call-ups. Would a Kane trade require a roster player like Kakko, Kravtsov, plus Oddman amongst other draft picks?
Listen, it's 4.5 months away. Lots of things can happen. Teams generally don't trade top 6 players in order to get a rental. So if Kakko remains as a top 6, even if somehow he's back in the top 9, you want to add. You don't want to subtract and add. You just want to add at the trade deadline. Now, Vitali Kravtsov, who knows what's going to happen with him this year? He hasn't played. We don't know. He's played 3 minutes. So we don't know about Vitali Kravtsov. But to suggest that the Rangers would trade a top 6 player in order to rent Kane makes no sense. So if Kakko, if Lafreniere, if that's part of the asking price, then the Rangers obviously would say no to it. It's again, there's a lot ahead. The cap considerations are going to be paramount, and generally, the more other, right now they would be looking at Kane at 50%. That's $5.25 million in cap space they would need to have. If you brought a third team into it, you could shave that by another 50%. But if you bring another team into it, that means you're also have to give up more assets. And the Rangers, as I wrote the other night, would prefer to be in a position where Kakko, Lafreniere are playing so well that it obviates the need to empty the cupboard in order to get a player who's going to be there just for one, for the playoff run and as a rental. So it's an underlying narrative. It's going to be there all year, but it's way too early to start to zone in on what a Patrick Kane trade might look like.
David Quinn back at the Garden Thursday night with the Sharks. We've talked a lot about David Quinn since the start of this podcast, but now that we've kind of gotten away from his tenure in New York, how do you look back on it and how it unfolded?
I think that David actually, I think David did the job he was brought here to do. And he might not appreciate that, but he was generally brought in to take the baton and hand it off to somebody who was going to take the Rangers to the next level. He was the guy. He was a development coach. Now, you can quibble with that description. You can not like that description, but basically he was brought in to take the team from the letter to the next stage, which he did over 3 years. There were some missteps. There were some real highs, unexpected highs in his second season. The 1920 season, really unexpected highs. That's of course after they brought in Panarin as a free agent and traded for Trouba, who had a so-so first year, but it wasn't a traditional rebuild in that they were going to hit rock bottom and then build their way back up. They made that clear when they signed Panarin that that's not what their interest was. So Shesterkin came in the middle of that season. The Rangers took off. They roared basically into the pause, although they had kind of stumbled a bit a week or two beforehand. And then the pause, and then the bubble, and I think it all fell apart in the bubble. The experience in the bubble was negative. Management did not respond to it, and I think, as I wrote many times that year, the bubble hung over that season, and it was left to Quinn to address it, and I'm not sure he addressed it so well. So, but look, they got better under his watch. The plan really was for him to hand it over to the next coach who was going to take the team to the next level. And that's exactly what happened. They hired a different kind of coach. They hired an experienced coach who had gone to the Stanley Cup Finals, a coach, I think, who related a little bit better to the veterans than David did. And but I think if you take a look at his 3 years, depending on what your expectations were, he did what he was hired to do. And, to see him back in the same situation in San Jose with a team that has much, much less to build on than the Rangers did in when he took over in 18-19. I just wonder, is David Quinn meant to be this coach who takes over teams at the bottom of the league, and then after a couple of years, someone else comes in and kind of reaps the rewards of what he had done? But I'm sure he's not complaining. I'm sure he's not complaining at all about being in San Jose.
All right, last question here from subtext Warren Grossman, Paul Palmer. Opinions on Zach Jones and his ability to stick in the everyday lineup. Jones is playing well as Brayden Schneider's partner, but don't you think the Rangers need an experienced and more physical D-man in the 6th spot for the playoffs?
I don't know if they need a more experienced player. I think they might need some more size back there. But I think we have another 60 games or so in order to evaluate Zach Jones, in order to evaluate Libor Hájek. But again, there's not going to be a lot of cap space at the deadline. Last year the Rangers had an essentially unlimited amount of space with which to make deals at the deadline, and so they got 4 players. They got 4 important players. They got Tyler Mott, they got Andrew Kopp, they got Frank Vatrano, and they got Justin Braun, who became their 6th defenseman. They're not going to be able to do that this year. So, it's going to be interesting to see if Matt Robertson develops in Hartford this year. I do think that it's important for teams to have size back there in the playoffs. And, Adam Fox is not big. Ryan Lindgren is not big. Keandre Miller is big, but he doesn't, he's not a physical defenseman. So, yeah, I think the Rangers probably could use a little more size back there. But just because they could use it doesn't mean they're going to be able to do anything about it. So I think it's important that Jones develops. I think it's important that Robertson develops in Hartford, and then they can take a look at what they have.
All right, the big picture question of the week for you, Larry, from me. Who gave you the instant quote that became a story? What was the one player that you covered over these years who was always giving you a great quote for a great story?
Bobby Holik. Bobby Holik. It was incredible. I think I probably wrote, well, I'm pretty sure that I've written more words about Henrik Lundqvist than any other player I've covered. I mean, that makes sense. I covered essentially his entire career. I would say the second probably would be Brodeur, because I covered him for so long, and Marty was a dream. And Marty was a writer's dream. He was as good with the media as he was in nets. I mean, he would talk on game days, mornings. He was incredible, just incredible. So, Brodeur was right there, but it always wasn't that, Brodeur was always there for a story. But I think probably, I probably wrote the 3rd most words about Bobby Holik, and both in New Jersey and when he came to the Rangers. And listen, I mean, he spoke his mind. He didn't care. He didn't care what people thought of what he said. And his all-time quote came the game where the Rangers had traded for Jágr in the 03-04 season. They got him in January of 04. And their first game was in Ottawa. Jágr's first game was in Ottawa. So he joins the team in Ottawa. They have this big press conference in the morning. Messier's there, Leach is there, Jágr's there. And Jágr actually starts, looks around, looks at the stars on the team, and they did have some. Lindros was there. And he talked about how this reminded him of the Penguins teams, the great Penguins teams he had played on. So, okay, fine. They go out in Ottawa that night and they lose 9-1. 9-1. So Bobby Holik, after the game, standing there, and all he has to say is, fundamentally, I think we are the worst team in the National Hockey League. But that was just one of Bobby's highlights. He was He was always a go-to guy. He was just honestly, if you couldn't get a story from Bobby Holik, you're in the wrong business.
Well, Larry Brooks, you are a go-to guy here on the Up in the Blue Seats podcast. You can follow him on Twitter, NYP_Brooksy. Read his stories in the Post, nypost.com. Larry, appreciate you coming on.
Thanks a lot.